we constantly limit ourselves. It comes back to what I was saying earlier about like how I was putting myself against other people and feeling like I need to catch up. It's because of that mentality of like, I need to do a certain thing at a certain age. Um, and I think it's very important for all of us to unlearn that concept of, if you are past a certain age, you you can't do certain things anymore. Of course, there are things that come with age. Of course, there are limitations that do come with age. Um, like physical limitations. Also, certain opportunities are not open anymore to like people above a certain age. Um, so I believe that it's important to not be so hung up on that idea of, damn, if I am past 29, I should really just give this up.
All right. And we are rolling. Thank you so much, Tanaka, for being here. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come through and be on the podcast. Without the generous people that take the time out to be here, this podcast is absolutely nothing. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
No, it's definitely my pleasure.
It's been a hustle. I've tried to get you on here before, and there's been hesitation. What changed your mind this time?
In the beginning, remember, I didn't have a way to record myself because back then I didn't have a laptop at the time. And then it just kind of, our schedules just kind of got busy. And then here we are, a few years later.
So, do you have a better schedule now? Where are you at now? Like, what's your schedule looking like? What's life looking like? Tell us about the last year and a half, maybe 2 years. What's been happening there?
Oh my gosh, where to even begin? So, okay, 2 years ago, I was doing my third year of varsity. Um, that was actually the most chilled year out of all my years doing industrial design, studying industrial design.
Shouldn't that be the most
Surprisingly,
difficult year?
surprisingly, it was the most chilled year because from first year you get there and yes, you're a creative person, but there's so much to learn in terms of design thinking and all the other load of stuff that comes with being new in the industry and being new at the university and in the department, and you're a freshman and you don't know what you're doing. And then second year comes and you're like, okay, I think I've got the hang of it. And then it hits you like a bus again. Like it gets worse. It gets worse. And then you get to third year. I think the lecturer that we had was like very chill. Like he's a chill person. Um, I think that kind of seeped into us as well, or at least into me. And also the years before us always said that third year is going to be a little bit more relaxed than the past couple of years. So that was pretty much it. And then I got to my honors.
Let's talk
You're
about
coming.
it. Let's talk about it.
So with honors, I was coming from third year, which was like kind of relaxed. And I basically went from that kind of tempo in my life, that kind of speed that I was used to suddenly post grad. um, and all this stuff about theories, and I don't know, it was just a lot going on at the same time. Um, and I think the biggest thing now, like in hindsight, I would say one thing I wish they had done better was to kind of have like specific topics there already for us to kind of pick and choose from. And then if we want to modify, we can modify, because we had just come from, undergrad, and we were used to these kinds of projects where you could just identify a problem and then design a solution for that problem. We weren't used to like having to go out there and not only identify a problem, but identify a problem that had the potential to have a lot of research done behind it. Of course, the design process already starts with research involved, but the intensity of the research that was required at honors level was just
Unreal.
like, yeah, it was unreal. It was pretty much unreal. So things just kind of went downhill for me.
Sure.
At honors, I don't know. There's something about, like, as a person, I always try to remind myself to just stay humble, and that's something I actually struggle with, because there's a very thin line between being humble, or like humbling yourself, and kind of not appreciating like how good you actually are at your work. So that was something that I constantly battled with from the time I started studying industrial design. Was I always like told myself, like, every time I achieved something or did really well at something, I'd always be like, no, it's not me, it's God. Of course it's like, it's God. It's definitely God. But at the same time, there's a pitfall that you can fall into where you end up with like hectic imposter syndrome, because you now don't really even believe in your own skills. You're always thinking, oh, it was by grace. I don't want to say it's by luck, because that's like a whole nother story.
That's a whole
um
different ball game.
that's a whole different ball. Yeah, so I finished third year, graduated with distinction, and then I thought, okay, I think I've got the hang of it. I think I've got the hang of this. And then honors showed me that yeah, I suffered a lot of imposter syndrome like throughout my year, and I guess my biggest pitfall was I was trying to be more experimental with my practice, basically. But the institution that I was at, basically, the support system that I was expecting to have behind my crazy, wild ideas, all these things that I wanted to do, I just kind of didn't get that. I didn't get that support. And I started questioning myself. I started questioning my abilities as a designer, my own vision, my way of thinking. And when that doubt crept in, that also came with the imposter syndrome, and things just like went downhill from there. uh like, originally my plan was to just like finish honors, do masters, but at the end of the year I was like, I feel broken right
What
now,
the heck?
and I don't want to.
Shucks.
I was like, I need to just take a break from this institutional system and just like step out of this environment, and now, like, looking back, I'm glad I made that decision, because like throughout um my life after high school, I always kind of felt like everybody else got a head start ahead of me, because I took 2 gap years after high school. So I felt like I was constantly on this clock, and I had to like do
Catch up
certain
in
things at a
some way.
certain time to catch up with everyone
Yeah,
else,
yeah, yeah.
So I put myself on this fast track, and I was like, I need to get my together, and just I was like, let's just take that and put that on the side for now, and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
focus on my mental health, because I like now I'm doing a lot better. Like now I'm working as an industrial designer, and
Come on now, let's
thankfully
go. Let's go. That's what we're talking about. That's what's
yeah,
up.
I'm gonna get to like that story just now as well. But when you asked me about my schedule, like now I can breathe. I don't have to work on weekends anymore. I don't take work home. Like, I'm so grateful for my job, because the people, my superiors, basically, I thankfully managed to come to an understanding with them. We came to an understanding between us that work starts at 7:30 and ends at 4, and afterwards
It's me
I am
time.
not expected. Yeah, like they basically understand that once work is done for that day, however much you manage to do in that day, you pick up from where you left off the next
The
day.
next day. Yeah. I think it's really cool that your superiors have that understanding with you. Because I know a lot of people who um, don't have the freedom of separating work and home, which makes it very difficult. And I think right now it doesn't seem like a bad thing. It probably won't feel like a bad thing if you're a single individual. You've just left university and you're taking your work at home. But as you try and grow and move into other stages of your life, and by other stages, I'm talking about dating, getting married, and starting a family, taking work home is probably like the worst thing that could happen to you. And just like anything else, tikajaidza something for a long time, it's very hard to change it later. So if you're the kind of person right now at the current job where you're allowed to take work home and you think nothing of it, if you stay at that job for the foreseeable future and then you are like, oh, okay, I want things to change around, it's probably going to be like, but you've been running the show for a long time. So just like that with anything in life. So I like that you've got, what you need for you to function at your best. You need time away from work and you need that time away for you and you alone. And I think it's a combination of everything that you've learned throughout your time in university as well. So being able to set your foot down and state, Kuti, this is what I need, and also have people understand that that's a blessing. That's an absolute blessing. So I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear um, the progression of the things that have happened to you in the last maybe 4 or 5 years. Starting off on a high and then kind of hitting a slump, and then turning the pages and then coming out the other end, having learned all these things. And I can pick out 3-4 things you've mentioned in there already, where you're like, this is what I learned about myself, this is what I learned about the world, this is what I learned about creativity. And you're like, really unprovoked. I didn't even ask you. but you're just so aware. You are so tuned in into what happens. And I always talk about this with everyone I meet, on the podcast, off the podcast. Kuti, when we go through things, like, God's very intentional about that. When we go through good things, there are lessons that need to be learned, there are aspects of our character that need to be shaped. When we go to bad things, it's the exact same thing. He mentioned in the Bible, Kuti, um, be joyful in every single situation. And every situation is good and bad. I think you found that. You found the ability to learn, build yourself up, correct yourself through everything you've been through, which I think is super, super incredible.
Oh my
But
gosh. Speaking of which,
yeah.
Recently, because I started working towards master's applications whilst I was in third year. Because initially I had the wrong, like a misconception about how, how in South Africa, for you to do your master's, you need to have your honors. And in some schools in the UK and around the world, in other places as well. But then I realized at some point during my third year, that I could actually just apply with a 3-year degree. Like, I didn't need to do my honors. I didn't have to have an
100%.
honors to
That's what I did.
get into. Yeah. So in third year, I applied to two schools with top design programs in the world, just to see what would happen. Like, I was like,
just to test the waters,
Let's see what would happen if I just
cheeky
shoot my shot,
Yeah.
So I applied to University of Auckland in New Zealand, and I also applied to Parsons School of Design at the New School in New York.
Very good schools,
And
both of them
then,
actually.
right? Yeah. So I was just like, you know what? Let's just apply. But to be honest, now that I look back, I'm like, I was spreading myself really thin at the time. And I was also like, I wasn't laser focused enough on like one thing that I wanted, with all this experimentational mindset, like the experimentational mindset that I had about applying and everything. Because I remember in January, I was like, maybe I should start looking for scholarships just in case I do get into these schools. Because I did get into University of Auckland, like by,
Well done. What the heck?
I think by, thank you. By December of 2021, I had already gotten accepted and I had been offered a full accommodation scholarship, but they didn't have opportunities for tuition scholarships. So I was like, okay, I have, I'm covered in terms of accommodation, but how am I going to pay for my studies?
Yeah,
Yeah.
shucks. I didn't know
So
people
that
get
just,
accommodation That's
I
very
also
interesting.
didn't know there was such a thing.
I
Like
didn't
I only
know.
knew of like full ride scholarships that cover everything from
Everything.
tuition to living expenses to
Yeah.
everything else. So I was quite surprised. So I got that, and then now there wasn't enough time to like look for another scholarship to cover tuition because I was due to start in February of 2022. And with like applying for a visa, and it was just like,
There was going to be
well,
too much going on in
that's,
such a short space of time.
yeah, it really sucked having to let that go.
I'm
And
so sorry. Oh,
I've had, anyway, I feel like I'm jumping too much ahead of like the lesson behind this before getting to, let me not skip anything. Okay, so January 5th of January, that's when I submitted my application. 5th of January 2022, that's when I submitted my applications to Parsons. And then during that time, I was like, maybe I should look for scholarships right now. But then I was like, me get into Parsons. Like,
not
I don't
gonna
know
happen.
if that's
No
it. I don't know about
ways.
that.
No ways.
Imagine. No,
Tanaka.
remember that imposter syndrome that I was talking about? We have to really learn to be self-aware and to learn to bring ourselves back into ourselves when we start to lose our minds. Because when these kinds of things happen, you look back and you're like, but why didn't I just... Anyway, in March, 11th of March, I received an email. I logged onto the freaking thing and they were like, congratulations.
Oh,
you got in and we're offering you a 35% scholarship.
you are kidding me.
I'm like, what? So now I'm celebrating, I'm happy, everything. But then they wanted like $500, like to secure my place by the, I think it was a few weeks after like finding out. And I was like, where the heck am I gonna get $500 in a few weeks? $500 in a few weeks, right? And then I was like, okay, I have this 35% scholarship, but their yearly fees were like $65,000.
And how long is the program?
It was 2 years. $65,000, right? And I think that was excluding the 35% they had offered me. So I was sitting there like, okay, right now I can't even raise $500. Where am I?
I'm so sorry.
Where am I gonna
like,
get?
You're telling me 65K, and I'm thinking, okay, 65K times 2. I'm already doing the math. 120, 35% on 120, and then you're like, no, chill, dude, chill. That's after it's been done. 35%
I can't even raise $500. Where am I gonna get this other
What the
65%.
bruh, that's
Yeah.
before living expenses, bruh. That's
That's
before
before
air
living
tickets.
expenses. That's before
Dude,
anything. That's before
dude.
visa application. That's before medical cover. Nothing.
Oh
You know?
my days.
And at that time, I was just so overwhelmed because I was happy that I got in. I was like, okay, let's celebrate the wins. But then with time, like over time, I started being more like intentional with my university applications, like my master's applications, because I was like, I don't want to apply and then just get in. Because almost is never enough, I can have this whole band of like achievements on my CV, but to what end, so I was like, I need to be more intentional about this, especially now that I was like, oh my gosh,
It's
getting
possible.
into these
I can
schools,
do
like
it.
these schools
I can
actually
do
want
it.
me,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I applied for an Erasmus Mundus program to study in Europe. I wanted to study, because in as much as I did study industrial design, I want to broaden my skill set. So I really want to go more into like the digital side of things with interaction design, that type of technology. That's where I'm trying to go into now. And one of those areas that I'm interested in is like UI and UX and like animation and stuff like that. So I applied for a program called the Service Design Strategies and Industries Erasmus Mundus program to study in like 3 countries. And I I really put all my eggs in like one basket, and I was like, I had so much faith because I was like, maybe the reason I haven't been getting what I want is purely because I just have not been applying. So at this time I had so much faith, and I'm like, I'm gonna get in. And then I applied and I didn't get in.
No ways. Unreal. After the last 2 incidences, you're probably like, surely.
Imagine, I was like, surely. No, they're like, we
You know what?
regret.
I
I
wish
applied to 2 programs and they're like, we regret.
I wish we could have attached your emails from Parsons in Auckland. Don't go you say, you know what?
Don't go to like I put all of the whatevers on my CV because with scholarships that you get offered, you can throw those.
You
under
can throw
your,
them.
like,
Oh my
achievements
days.
and awards. But yeah, with Erasmus Mundus, I think I went in with my heart a little too much. Like I just kind of put all my eggs in one basket, and that was like red flag number 1 also.
Number 1. Hey.
Red flag number 1. And then red flag number 2 was me not considering the fact that this is such a prestigious opportunity, right? First of all. And there are so many people out there in the whole world. Like, this is not just specific countries can apply. Anyone and everyone can apply for this, And I had to take into consideration the fact that so many people are going to apply, and not just people in general, like people who are also brilliant the way that I am brilliant, or even more brilliant than me, Wow, I never thought I would say that I am brilliant on camera. Toot my own
No,
horn
but
on.
you are. We've got a recording now. We've got evidence.
I got evidence. So I didn't even think about all that. I had just had so much stubborn faith, and like, I don't want to discourage anyone from having stubborn faith. The whole reason I started to tell the story to begin with was to essentially talk about how I spoke to my friend about this, and I was telling her how I'm like afraid to even try anything anymore, because I felt like I I don't know, like I reached a point where I felt like I wasn't involving God in my plans from scratch, like from the get-go. Like I was like, I want to know God's will so that I do exactly like what's on his schedule, or like what he has written down for me and stuff like that. Um and she basically said to me, she's Muslim, and you know how like a lot of the principles of Islam and Christianity, they're quite similar. Um and she was basically saying that nothing that happens in our lives is not permitted by God. Because like if he wanted to stop something from happening, he would, you know. And she was saying that everything that you go through, everything that happens to you, and everything that you allow to happen to you is a part of the process. It's a part of the journey leading you to where you essentially are meant to be, where you will eventually end up. Um, and she helped me realize that not getting something, or like something not working out in the way that you wanted to, is not something that should discourage you. Like you should understand it and take it in as part of the process. And that just made me feel so encouraged, because I was like, I don't feel afraid anymore to try anything out. Like
Let's
now
go. That's what's
now I
up.
feel so encouraged to just like shoot my
Mm.
shot towards anything that anything that sparks my interest. I'm gonna shoot my shot, because there's no way of there's no like clear, direct, certain way of knowing that this is for me. But I feel like just because you feel compelled to do something, as long as it's something good, don't go out there killing people, doing crime, whatever. But
As
like,
long as you're compelled.
no, just need to put that disclaimer. Says what Tanaka Kati
Tanaka
inspire.
said, if I feel it, I should do
If
it.
I feel it, I should
No,
do it.
no,
No.
don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't take it out of context. Stay with me.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was the biggest lesson for me, because even with job applications, and just like, these are growing pains of getting out of the nest, both from like the perspective of leaving your parents' house, and also the perspective of like suddenly finding yourself in the deep end of the real world.
Come on now.
Things don't
Let's
yes things don't
Let's
always
go.
things don't always turn out the way we expect them to initially. But I believe that, yes, there are cases where you will learn the lesson whilst going through the process, but most of the time you will only realize why you had to go through something after you've already gone through it. Sometimes there's no way out of something except like through it. You can't
Through
go
it.
over, you can't jump over.
Come on.
You must go through it.
This is too real, man. I'm loving this. I am loving this so much. You know what? I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and I'm like, this person's so tuned in. And I mean, I'm not like I've sat down with a lot of tuned in people, but I think your ability to just recollect past events and connect them to lessons you've learned, and I'm like, this person should start her own podcast. You know,
it's on the way. It's on the way.
Self-titled podcast, The Brilliant Tanaka. You know what I'm saying? Come
Listen,
on.
you actually need to. I'm going to take this moment to promote my upcoming podcast called Mukundi Podcast. Just keep y'all's eyes out on your social medias. Like, it's coming.
And I think
it's coming this year.
I've listened. Yeah, I love that, and I'm so glad you've said that. Because I say this to a lot of people. I say they should start certain things and they should challenge themselves to go into certain things. I'm not just saying it because it's just coming from nowhere. It's because I genuinely believe there's something there. And for you specifically, it's so nice because you've got so much to say. Like you said earlier, you're very passionate, and it's very easy for you to talk about things endlessly by yourself, which is incredible. I've listened to a fair few podcasts that are like that, where munanungu gara ega shamari 3 hours munachungotaura. Hey, what's gonna say? And I'm like, but you can sit there and listen to them speak, because they're such a captivating audience by themselves, and that removes the dynamic of having to rely on other people for your podcast to be a success. Nothing wrong with having people there coming through. I think everybody's different, but I love the way you speak. Honestly, it feels like you've got a script, but these things are coming. No, for real, it feels like you've got a script. Everything you're saying is just kind of like flowing, and it's so easy for you to recollect and reconnect and convey it in such a easy to understand way, which I think is super, super incredible. But I appreciate everything you've been through. I appreciate the way you've taken it, and you've embraced it in a way. And I also thank God for allowing you to go through it as well. I think there's a lot of things that we would have never learned, and this speaks to everyone who's ever existed. We would have never learned unless we had to experience them for ourselves. And I think then that gives us an opportunity and the ability to help others who about to go through it, and you're like, yo, you know what, this is what it's gonna look like. That's probably what you probably need to do. And without the lessons we would have gone through, we can't be able to help people or help ourselves when you go through that situation again. So it's really cool where you're at. It's really cool the things you've experienced, and I can not wait to see what God then has to do with you, given the things you've learned and how He has equipped you for life, for creativity,
I'm
and everything that
also out here, like, I also can't wait. It's like
I'm waiting
now, any second.
I was talking to someone. I had someone recently on my podcast, and she said something really incredible. She's like, I read somewhere, Kuti, people really blow up and get super creative in their 30s. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's why I haven't figured it out in my 20s, because in my 30s is when I shine, It's like, okay, there's still time.
Yeah, let's hope.
Let's hope it happens and blows up in our 30s, But I wanted to find out from you when your earliest memory of anything remotely creative comes. Like, when you think back to you growing up, what do you think about? Were you always creative, or this is something that isn't?
I would say I have always been creative, because I think my earliest memory would be preschool.
No way. Come now.
Now that I think about it, I would say preschool, because I used to really enjoy just like drawing in general, like drawing. Like I don't have a mental, like, visual picture of like a specific drawing that I remember from like back in preschool, but I remember that I really enjoyed when we got to draw. And then a little bit later on in primary school, like towards the end, I used to draw, okay, maybe like somewhere in the middle. I used to draw people all the time. And at some point in, I think, this was now towards like the end of primary school, it dawned on me that I just wanted to be a fashion designer. Like I decided at some moment in time in like during primary school that I just wanted to be a fashion designer, because I enjoyed drawing people, right? And I think that now that I look back, I think that might have come from how I used to enjoy playing with my Barbie dolls, and how I used to enjoy those type of cartoons with like the girly girls and whatever. And like Bryce, life is complicated. I don't know. This is just making me so nostalgic. But anyway.
Oh
yeah. So that's basically how it started. I probably used to draw. I drew from imagination for years and years. I only actually started like drawing from reference. I think by the time I got to university, that's when I actually started drawing from reference.
Really? And the whole time you're just drawing from?
yeah, like I used to just draw from my imagination. And I remember at some point, like during university, I got a bit afraid because I was taking classes in drawing where we had to draw from reference in order to refine our skills and whatnot. But I got afraid at some point because I was like, what if I become unable to draw from imagination? Because now I feel like like um
Reliant.
I've become reliant and somewhat disabled by the constant need to be looking at something in order to like know what to draw. But anyway, back to what I was saying, I basically like really enjoyed drawing people, and I remember at some point my dad or like both my parents were like, indawo chingogara chingodhra vanhu unenge chingodhra vanhu I'm gonna draw zvimwe zvine like why always drawing people all the time, like
Draw,
can't you
draw
draw
a
other
dog,
things?
draw a bird,
Draw a
draw a
landscape.
building.
Like what? Why are you always drawing people? You know?
Oh snap! That is funny.
Yeah, it's such a core meme. It's one of my core memories. But
You wait. Why? I know our parents can get
like
that. Oh snap!
yeah. So after that, I had my mind set that I was going to be a fashion designer. But then I got to high school and I like started doing technical graphics, and then I was also doing fashion and fabrics at the same time. But another like part of like my multifacetedness was I struggled with people pleasing as a child, and like up until a certain point as an adult, when I started to become more self-aware and to like understand myself more. So for me, a big part of my decision making in terms of my life goals and like a big part of what influenced my thought process and basically like my decision making was how were my parents gonna feel about it? Specifically, how was my dad gonna feel about what I end up doing, right? And then I was like, my dad is not gonna approve of fashion design. I mean, we all know how like taboo being a creative in Zim was at the time. Like I know right now it's still quite, but I'm so glad that there is growth in that there's growth and change in that area right now. But essentially I mentally by myself I discouraged myself from going down the route of fashion design because I was like, my dad's not going to approve of this. And I remember at some point I was like, let me just be an actuarial scientist because it sounded cool, but I didn't know. I really didn't know what it was about. And
Sounded
now,
cool.
now I look back and I'm like, Mari Makaita.
XI is a beast, bro.
Like
that one
my
is
brother
a
studied that and
beast.
he's working as that right now. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad you're good at this and you seem to like it, but no, maybe
It
I
wouldn't
wasn't
be
the
for
one
me.
in the
Hey,
family to do that. Yeah.
sure.
So I decided against that, thankfully. And then I was like, okay, architecture is a good, I feel like architecture is kind of, close to engineering, but I will still get to be creative. I'll still get to use my creative bone. So for like a big chunk of my teenage, I was set on becoming an architect. And I went to this architecture firm close to Belgravia. Yeah, close to Belgravia. And then I don't know if I should mention their name. I'm not going to say. No, let me keep names out of this. Nothing bad happened. Like they were really good to me and they were so nice and everything. But I was there for 2 weeks. It was for that work experience thing in Form 4. And I hated it. I hated it so much. I was like, no, because there was something intimidating and daunting about drawing buildings in terms of the size of it for me. And I was like, I'm more interested in drawing like smaller things, like
Smaller things. Yeah.
objects that I can, I was like, I think I prefer creativity in that angle if I'm going to be an architect of something. I don't know if, yeah. And I was also just like quite intimidated by the thought of like people's lives being in my hands. So I was like, I have to freaking make sure that the architecture is perfect so the building doesn't collapse and then they bring it back to the architect. So I realize now, I've actually been an overthinker since a long time
Since
ago,
day one.
clearly, because it's been a while.
Oh my days.
It's been a struggle for a while, clearly. Anyways, so now I was
2 weeks at this firm.
stuck. Yeah, 2 weeks at the firm. Afterwards, I was like, I hate this. Now I'm stuck again. And I can't go back to fashion design because my dad is not going to approve of that. So now I'm like, what am I going to do? Oh, shucks. But I was really enjoying design and technology as a subject. So now I became determined to find a career path that was exactly design and technology, but for grown-ups. So I went and I was like, I need to find this thing.
Dude, you're killing me. You are funny. For grown-ups.
I was like, I need to find this. I need to find the grown-up version of this. And
design and technology for grown-ups.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it took me a while. And eventually, I think during my first gap year, that's when I discovered, like, I remember in high school, like during upper six, I discovered product design. But then there was also industrial design. But then I was confused because I was like, what if product design is not industrial design? And what if industrial design doesn't have product? I was like so confused. And then during my first gap year, that's when I discovered that they are more or less one and the same thing. It's only in recent years that they have become like more nuanced. Like with product design, that's when you can do things like UX and UI, whereas with industrial design, it's heavily centered around designing physical products. It's only recently when they're trying to now incorporate like the digital side. So yeah, that's pretty much like how I know you asked me when was the
No.
memory.
No. It's cool.
Just went down a rabbit hole.
So my first memory is, and my 1500th memory is, you just kind of went through all of them.
I was like, I might as well tell you since we're here.
Might as well,
Yeah.
No, but that's the progression, and those are the things we want to hear. And I think it's good for you to be able to talk about these things out loud, because like you're saying now, you're realizing, oh snap, I've been an overthinker since day one, but I think it's there's so much you've touched on, so much that I want to touch on as well. But I think as creative people, a lot of the things you've mentioned are what make us who we are. That aspect of wanting to people please, that aspect of looking at other people's work and feeling like, oh, we're nothing, the aspect flip, I lost it. Dang it.
It's okay.
I lost I lost my chain of thought. Oh my days.
You were talking about
I think
different aspects of like being a designer, and was connected somehow to like people pleasing and like
overthinking.
Your work is not enough and overthinking. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's all about the balance. It brings me back to the thing you mentioned earlier about being humble, the humility, but also then crossing the line and just not being confident in yourself. There needs to be a balance. And you also mentioned earlier, Kuti, I'm brilliant, and you're like, I never thought I'd say I'm brilliant. But it's the things we say to ourselves. Words are very powerful. I've been reading James lately, and it speaks so much about the power of the tongue in a negative way. It's like this thing is so incredible. It's so small, but it's so incredible, and it's the power to destroy. It compares it to a spark that starts a fire and burns down a whole forest. Such a small thing, but such great destruction. But I think in the same breath, yeah, if it has, his warning is, don't use it for that. Use it to build, because it can build. Use it to encourage because it can encourage. Use it to strengthen because it can strengthen. So the things we say to ourselves are very important, and are, have a rolling effect on who we become or who others become, depending on who we're speaking to and what we're saying to them. But at the same time, it could also make us feel like we're bigger than who we are. So I think there needs to be a balance between the two things. And I think as creatives as well, a big reason why we have this urge to people please, subconsciously or consciously, is because I think a lot of the time we are creating art for ourselves, but we're not really. We do to a certain extent, and then we release it to be shared and experienced by other people. And that's why we have that desire to people please, because we want our products, we want our work, our art, our thought processes, and the things we bring to the world to actually have a positive effect. So that's what I'm choosing to believe. Like subconsciously, we want to affect positive change, and we are afraid of that not happening, and that probably then spills into our lives outside creativity as well, and just constantly thinking, well, constantly, how can I be the most effective? How can I be the best version of myself in this situation for this people? And then if we don't realize that that's who we are, it consumes us and it wrecks us. But then being able to embrace that and use it in a more positive sense to influence our work, our workflow, and influence the products we create, it's actually taken in a more positive light as well. So I don't think it's a bad thing that you've been an overthinker. I think most creative people are. But I think it also shapes who you are today. All the things you've been through, like you've mentioned as well, have led you to this point, which I think is super incredible. So I appreciate you sharing this. It brings a lot of context to who you are as a creative, and the life you're leading now, and the life you're going to lead moving forward. But in your years as a creative, in your years in this creative space, in this creative world, and in the world in general, what do you think being a creative or creativity in general has revealed to you about the world? Like, what epiphanies have you had and you're like, shucks, what the heck?
Oh my
I
gosh,
think
this is such an exciting question. Oh my gosh.
I'm so glad you understand what I'm asking. I'm so glad. I put that question in there, and I was like, oh, I hope they're not like, oh, what are you trying to say? So I'm
Oh
glad.
my gosh.
Okay, I'll let you
Okay,
answer that. I'll let you
I
answer
need to
that.
contain myself because I will go on and on. But
Don't. Let's hear it. Let's go.
the biggest epiphany for me, I'm gonna share two things that I have realized due to creativity. The first and the biggest one for me was that God is a designer. He's a designer. He's a multidisciplinary artist. He's all these incredible creative things.
You can't see me right now, but I'm screaming. I'm screaming.
Because, oh my gosh, and that freaking blew my mind.
That changes everything.
Blew my mind.
It changes.
Because I was like,
Tanaka, no.
Tanaka. Oh my gosh. Because you know how, like, I didn't mention this earlier, but something that I struggled with, especially during high school, was like finding a right path for myself, because my brain is so like multifaceted in the sense that I'm
moving.
Interested. Yes, I'm interested in like a lot of things at the same time. And at some point I used to believe that science, arts, and like commercials or whatever didn't belong, like you couldn't merge those things together. But now with experience and whatever, I realized that you can do those things.
Come now.
And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I was also I really enjoyed biology during high school. And like as I continue to evolve as a creative person and to like understand how creativity's neurons are running through the world in terms of through nature and like through the world systems, and every single thing that we see is designed from nature to like world systems that are man-made and whatever. But that biggest epiphany for me just like freaking blew my mind, and I couldn't fathom it, and I had to stop thinking immediately because my brain was gonna explode. Because I was thinking
Like,
about
take it
how
easy, take
like
it easy.
you start to think about the human nervous system as just as a tiny meager example of God's creation, and you're like, God sat there and was like, this is gonna connect to this, and this needs to be in this way. Because we look at things in, as an for example, as an industrial designer, um I look at my water bottle, for example. I look at this pair of scissors, and the fact that these holes are a certain distance from the pivot point and a certain distance from the tip of the blades, it's not just for vibes. Like someone designed it that way so that it can function in a specific way. And when you start to apply that concept to like every single thing you see around you, it blows your mind because you're like, wow, someone sat down and thought about this and realized that it had to be this shape and form in order to specifically, efficiently, and perfectly achieve a certain goal and to solve a certain problem in a specific way. And I was like, that is so freaking mind blowing. And
It's mind blowing, you know.
I get to be that person as an industrial designer. That's my job. And I was like, oh my, that's just like so freaking mind blowing.
That's exciting. That's
So
exciting.
yeah, for me, just that, like that one epiphany of like everything is the way it is because someone put thought and time into it and researched and did everything that needed to be done for it to function the way it functions and solve the problem it solves. That's like the second epiphany. And the first one is just that realization. It's, I guess the second one is derived from the first one of like everything I see around me, God sat down and designed it a specific way to the finest atom and neuron and proton and it's like,
it's
oh my
mind
gosh,
blowing.
it's mind blowing. It's so
I had a
mind
photo
blowing.
shoot recently of a new baby boy, and I was just thinking of the concept of a mother carrying a child for 9 months, from inception, dude, to the point this a human being, an actual human being comes out of another. I'm just like, it's too much. The design, you know, the lack of a better word, technology that goes into that is oh dude, I'm just like, any second later, any moment before, any centimeter off, and everything falls apart. I'm like,
Everything falls apart. Yeah.
it's unreal. It's
It's
unreal. There's
unreal.
I think about computer systems. I think about world systems and how they they run on something. They depend on a certain type of energy for them to continue to run. You know, for computer systems, it's power, it's electricity, it's hard drives, and it's things like that. For world systems, it's governments and things like that. If the people in those governments fall apart, the government's going to fall apart, the world system's going to fall apart. If electricity is not there, if power's not there, the computer systems are not going to work. I start thinking about the world and the universe and the animals and the air that we breathe, and I'm just like, yo, one man is just like holding
Yeah.
all that.
One person is just, and
Literally. So
yeah, yeah,
that's where my question comes from. I think for me, I've realized that, and I think I'm now very curious to hear what art and creativity has revealed in all the other creators, and people in general. And for me, that's what it is, man. Like, I've started to see God more the more I am in touch with my creativity, and it's a two-way. It's a vice versa thing. So the more I'm in touch with God, the more I'm in touch with my creativity, and the more I'm in touch with my creativity, the more I'm in touch with God.
Whoa,
And
that is whoa.
you know what I'm saying.
It's
So
like
for me,
it's like an infinite loop.
it's an infinite loop. It keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. And for me, it's like initially that wasn't the case, and I've learned so much. Initially, when I got into this creative thing, that wasn't the case. I think there was a lot of self glory in there. There was a lot of rock star mentality, take over the world type of thing. And obviously, nothing wrong with wanting success, but it's like, to what extent, And I definitely jumped into it with the wrong mentality initially, but God revealed so much through that and through my mistakes, and realizing, I can be successful, but at the same time, attest all glory to God in the end, which is what the mission is now. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's incredible that you answer it that way, because that's what inspired me to ask the question in the beginning, which is super cool. But it also got me thinking. That's what it's revealed to you about the world. What is it revealed to you about yourself? And I know you've mentioned a lot of things, just sitting here, overthinking and like patience, and everything happens for a reason, all these things. But for you, the biggest thing when you look at like, I'm a creative, and one of the things that I really hold on to is this, because that's what I've seen and that's what I've experienced, and that's what this process has revealed to me.
To be honest, that is actually surprisingly something I have never thought about. And I'm realizing now that I'm constantly looking outside of myself. And the biggest thing I believe is, or like one of the biggest things in life is to learn to be self-aware in order to like grow your emotional intelligence and like your self-presence as a person. And for me, I'm currently on that journey of like learning more about myself, and you asking this question just
Puts you on
yeah,
the spot a bit.
it puts me on the spot, and
It's
I
okay not to have
honestly,
figured it
yeah,
out. It's really
I don't
okay.
have an answer for you actually about that.
It's
Yeah.
totally okay. And these are things that take time. I was speaking to someone recently, and they were kind of asking, they wanted to start a podcast, and they're really scared. They're like, oh, you know what? And they've got all these questions. And one of the things I said to them was that, one of the biggest things about the the journey of life, is that we often tend to be afraid of change. We want to get into something, and it needs to work, and it needs to be perfect. And any thought of it possibly changing could actually possibly hinder us from getting into it in the first place, without even realizing it. So what I said to her was, if you get into this podcast and you start talking about mental health, for example, and you get to episode 10 and you realize that this is not what I want to do, I want to talk about sport, it's okay. And she's like, yo, yeah. So her response was, I didn't even realize that I was afraid of that. That's when I also realized that most people even I wasn't aware, but only through going through the process of having a podcast, of having a creative project going on, and changing the title, changing the colors, changing the things I want to talk about over time. And I'm not dead. No one's got a gun to my head.
Did you die?
Did you die? You know what I'm saying? So I told her that, and she was like, yo, thank you so much for telling me that. And for that realization, Yokuti, we're constantly learning. So for you to be here and be like, I haven't figured it out, dude, that's totally okay. Yeah, you're only in your 20s, and you're only kickstarting your career, and you've got so much to achieve and accomplish. And it's also good that you're not forcing a lesson into it. The temptation is to have someone ask you the question and say something for the sake of saying something. I've lost count of how many times I've been in a position where I've had to, just because of the question and I have to give an answer, I say things, not that there's not any truth to it, but it's probably not the most relevant thing in that moment. So your ability to be like, yo, hold on, I'm not quite there yet, I'm still trying to figure it out, That's huge. That's brilliant stuff. You know what I'm saying? See what I did there? Brilliant.
I see what you did there. But Luca, before you go on, I just want to disagree with something you said. It was a very tiny little thing you said. But you said you're still, you're only in your 20s. And for me, recently, I've realized that that is like quite a toxic mentality that has been engraved into us, like through socialization, basically. I feel like in life we constantly limit ourselves. It comes back to what I was saying earlier about like how I was putting myself against other people and feeling like I need to catch up. It's because of that mentality of like, I need to do a certain thing at a certain age. And I think it's very important for all of us to unlearn that concept of, if you are past a certain age, you you can't do certain things anymore. Of course, there are things that come with age. Of course, there are limitations that do come with age, like physical limitations. Also, certain opportunities are not open anymore to like people above a certain age. So I believe that it's important to not be so hung up on that idea of, damn, if I am past 29, I should really just give this up. I need to carry on with my life. Yeah. I don't know. I just wanted to put that out
No,
there.
I appreciate you pointing that out. And I appreciate you calling me out as well. And it's so true. It's so true. And it's like I was saying, the power of the tongue and the things that we say. It's small things, and like you said, it's just a little thing. You kind of just throw it in there, and you just kind of move on. But subconsciously, it plays a big part. And to anyone else who'd probably be listening as well, it plays a big part. And I think you're so right, that we we've put ourselves in a box, and we've almost kind of given life a formula. You go to school at this age to this age, and then you must go to high school, and then you must go to university, and then you must get a job, etc. You should have kids at a certain age, you should retire at a certain age.
I mean,
And
for women, we can now freeze our eggs. So.
how incredible, you know what I'm saying? But it's crazy. It's not just social media and the way we grow up. I mean, we even go into things like getting jobs or moving to certain countries, and they put age caps at it. They're like, at this age we feel like you're a liability to our community. We can't accept you. You've got too many you possibly have too
Yeah,
many
which
health
is
issues.
fair to a certain extent. Yeah.
But it's a culmination of the thought process, Yakuti. We've almost given life its stages, and it's kind of set that way, but it's not really, like you're saying. And I think it's difficult to not think that way, given the way our life revolves around content and social media. And for you, I guess my question then would be, how do you renew your mind to think differently when it comes to that concept? I know you mentioned that we shouldn't, but like practically speaking, have you figured that out, or it's something you're constantly trying to remind yourself in?
Practically, I would say it's definitely something I have to constantly remind myself of. And for me, my biggest remedy to like, because I constantly find myself in like this cycle of 1 second I'm like completely fine, for a while I'm like completely fine, and then out of nowhere I'm just like in this mental rut that I need someone to freaking fish me out of. And for me, my biggest remedy has just been speaking to God.
Sure. Bring it
For
back
me,
home.
that's been like the biggest thing, because I feel like relationship and religion, they're very interlinked, but it's very important to like prioritize relationship as well, because it's very easy to feel like your relationship with God has to be a certain way, but I believe that relationship is very personal and unique. And just like taking your time to figure out your rhythm between you and God, to just like get into that rhythm and find that rhythm between you and God, that's just like helped me a lot, you know. And I haven't figured it out completely. Um, but I just like thankfully have now come to a point where I can be vulnerable enough with God. There are days when I feel like I need to hold back and whatever, but now I'm just like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing right now. And I just really, really need you to help me. Please just like pull me back together again right now, because I am on my way down really fast. So for me, that's been like the biggest way to kind of, yeah, to kind of like keep myself in check, I guess. And also another thing is just like my friends as well. Um, like as you, I don't know if it's like a thing that comes with growing older or if it's a thing that comes with experience and not necessarily with age. But as you like, the more experiences you have in life, the more things you go through, the more you realize what kind of people um you want to keep around. And I think that's really important, because I feel like to a certain extent your circle reflects who you are. um I feel like sometimes we look at our friends when we're like, wow, these are really good people and whatever, but sometimes we don't realize that oftentimes the reason we ended up with such good people is because there's also a little bit of good in us. And I think that that goes a long way in terms of keeping yourself in check, because if your circle is also, for example, one of my really good friends, Aura, shout out, shout out, Aura, if you're gonna watch this. But she basically, like, she understands, and Joseph as well, Joseph Ngorai, shout out. You know, those two people for me, just as examples, they understand when I'm like going through it, and they kind of have figured out a way to like wait it out with me, and then eventually, like, I don't know, they just like know what to do and say to help me through those rough patches, you know. And I'm really grateful for that. So for me, those are like the two biggest ways that I kind of help myself stay in check, and also help myself get out of like a pit if I do end up like falling into that constant turbulence that is social media and
Yeah,
everything that comes with with all of that.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that. Especially when you bring up your friends and even, you know, naming them specifically, because I think one of the biggest things as well. I asked the question about what um creativity has revealed to you about the world, what it has revealed to you about yourself. I think I realized that for both those questions, what it revealed to me, and this is not the only thing, but one of the most important things, is the need for community. You know, it's the need for fellowship.
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
Again, you know, I mentioned getting into this creative thing and having this mindset of wanting to do something alone, um, and to an extent, even justifying it. You know, it's like, you know what, I want to build this podcast, I want to really do it by myself, and I'm really scared to have other people join it because they don't think the way I think. You know, they don't they haven't been with me from the beginning, and they don't know the vision that I have, and I think I'm scared to try and teach them and exert myself, and then they don't execute it the way I want it to be. And then that came with a lot of realization, and I think the first thing was this thing is not for me. It's for everybody else listening to it. So if someone else can come in and bring a different perspective to it, that is necessary maybe sometimes, to just not have this thing run from one perspective. And then it also helped me realize, Kuti, growing and then realizing that, I do need people because I can't do this alone. The amount of times I've had creative block or creative slump, which is going to happen often. The podcast's been dead, creativity has been dead. No one's been there to pick it up and keep it moving. And when you have a team who at least try to understand you, not saying that they get you totally 100%, but it's easier for someone to come through and pick it up and hold it and drive it forward. And I'm reminded so much of that by what you're saying now. And I know I said earlier, I was scared to have people come in and teach them and they don't understand. But I've also learned that people can understand you, and you are a testament of that. You're mentioning your two friends here and how they're able to guide you through a situation and bring you out the other end. And that's because they understand you. You've been able to be vulnerable enough with them, and they've been able to have their arms open wide enough to be able to understand you, and patience and all those things. So I appreciate you saying that, because it's something that I'm learning right now and I'm trying to get out of, and I'm constantly refining my thought process. The concept of community, the concept of having a team, the concept of having people who you rely on to carry it forward. So I appreciate that. That's a huge lesson for me. Something that I'm really trying to refine. It's a huge thing, and I think there's been a lot of selfishness and pride, I'm realizing now, in me saying those things. And you can almost defend it to a point where you feel really justified, and it almost kind of makes sense why you don't want to have a team or work with other people. But when it comes down to it, the qualities or the reasons for doing those things aren't really good at all. So I'm working on that, and I appreciate you sharing it, because then it gives me a reference point. I can listen back to this and definitely pick up lessons from you. Thank you. Thank you so much. But we spoke about the influence of creativity on you and how you view the world, and in the future how you realize how you view yourself. But why are you here? Why are you doing what you're doing? And what do you think, if you figured it out, is your purpose, creatively speaking, or otherwise, just generally? Like, how are you going to serve the community moving forward? I don't know.
Okay.
That feels like a very intense question, but I hope it makes sense.
It is.
Yeah.
But why am I here? Honestly, the reason I'm here right now as a creative person and as a person in general is because I chose this path. And the reason I chose this path is because I went through something that made me decide that from this point going forward, I am not going to do something I don't enjoy. And I remember before, like, jumping in head first into the world of industrial design and just multidisciplinary design in general, I was concerned because I was like, product design, there's so many products already out there. What new thing am I going to bring to the table, But I don't even remember at what point I decided to just do it anyway. So for me, one of the reasons that I'm here is because I have decided to live out the biggest part of me, which is that creativity in me. And I cannot imagine myself doing anything else. Like, I can't imagine my life going, like, what my life would have been if I had done something completely different from what I'm doing now. And then I think I haven't figured out my full purpose completely, but I feel like or like a part of it is to bring encouragement and to be an example to other creatives who might have been in the same position that I was, or who currently are in the position that I was, where I was afraid to go down a creative path because of the precedent that had been set before me of how taboo, it was to become a designer or like anything remotely creative because of how the economy is just so unforgiving towards anything along the lines of a creative career, and like trying to make that lucrative or like make a really good living out of that in the community that I grew up in, or like the country that I grew up in. It's just, it's a very difficult and daunting thing to think about. So I feel like part of my purpose is to be that example um for someone else out there who may be watching and like is trying to decide if they should go down a similar path, or like if they should pursue their passions. I feel like that is part of my purpose, to show that it can be done. um and however difficult things may get, I feel like I don't ever want to be at a certain age later on in my life and look back and wish I had done anything differently. So that's like the biggest, yeah, that's like the biggest thing for me right now, especially at a point. I don't know why specifically now at this point in my life, I'm just like super, super careful and intentional about the decisions I make, because I'm just at an age where there is also now slowly, like I'm also slowly now starting to feel that expectation and like low-key pressure of like, when are you getting married,
Oh my days!
um
Don't even get me started about that one.
and I can't help but think about it almost every single time I
You
sit
are
down and
not
think about my
alone,
life.
my friend. You are not alone. Yeah.
It's crazy. And I I've had different voices, influences telling me, oh, you can always carry on as an individual, but while you're with someone. And I just, sometimes I get trapped in that room that has all these speakers of other people's voices, and I feel so trapped, and I start to think along those lines of, oh, maybe I should just do it. um and I keep having to like put a hand through the door and like pull myself out of that room, because I have to remind myself that at some point in my life I'm going to look back at this very decision that I'm going to make right now, and I need to think about how I'm going to feel about that. um so Ish, what was your question again? I'm like really just going on and on, and now I've
No,
forgotten
you're
where I was
not.
going with
You are
this.
very much on track. What I had asked is like, what's your purpose? And
Oh yeah.
you had mentioned
Yeah,
that you really haven't figured that out, but then you're explaining what it means to not have it figured out yet and still discovering that,
exactly.
which makes so much sense. So you're on track. You're definitely
Yeah.
on track.
So apart from the two things that I've mentioned, like when I think about all those things, or like those bits and pieces of my purpose that I have discovered, um, that's what then brings me to what I am talking about right now, of like constantly having to pull myself out of, yeah, like I have to be intentional about everything, because I, like, now that I've figured out parts of my purpose, and I'm like continuing to figure out more and more about myself and why I'm here, I feel a greater responsibility to be more intentional about
Yeah.
my decisions. Yeah.
No, that is incredible. That is real. I think what hit me in the face, both sides of my cheek actually, was I need to be able to look at the decision I'm about to make now and the decisions that I'm making now, and then think, how am I going to feel um, when I look back at this now, you know? And I think we've done a decent amount of looking back and tracking back in history, just looking at some of the decisions you'd already made, and you're like, if I had, and I think we all do that. We can all sit down and look at things we've done and put if in front of that. And I think those should be lessons. Those should be the things that, like, okay, so what was it then that I did that I can change moving forward? And I think one of the biggest things, and this definitely applies to everybody, is just taking more time to make a decision. Just a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more delicate with the process, and not rushing it. And I think, again, ties back to what you've been saying about feeling that pressure. Kutisha, everybody else, like, I've felt that, like, because I also took 2 gap years, and I've really felt like, one way in the life, all my days, one way in the life, and I'm just here, like, when am I gonna catch up? But that involves a lot of that brings me to, I just thought of a really I must share it though. I must share what I'm laughing
Please
at.
go ahead.
And like jumping into things too quickly and not thinking about the decisions you're making. I remember when I was taking my gap year, that's when I got into photography for the first time. Like, I had no, like, not love per se, but I didn't see myself being a creative ever. I probably did draw here and there growing up just for fun. Probably took art class, but it was never something I was like, I want to get into something creative. I wanted to be an accountant, and that didn't go really well. But I took 2 gap years, and I think in that space where I had just like a lot of time, I picked up photography. And towards the end, when I was getting ready to go to university, I remember sitting down with my parents and telling them, this photography thing looks promising, and I'm getting gigs left, right, and center. What I think would be a good decision would be if you withdrew your deposit from university, invested it in me, and I'd have that money back to you in like a year. It's literally what I told them. Straight up, straight face. I wasn't capping. But they grounded me, man. They said so many valuable things then.
They're like, bruh,
and they were supportive.
sit down.
Sit down. Take it easy. They were supportive and grateful that I found a passion in something that made me happy. But they also brought me down to the reality of realizing that, okay, you want to be a photographer, and you do understand that that is a business that you're going to need to run, and you're going to have people that you need to hire. Why not go to university and get a foundation on how to run a business? And you finish that, and you can pursue it on the side. You can finish that, and you can take it up however you want to. And it made so much sense at the time. And I was so passionate and determined to carry forward, and I still am. But I then realized after I went to uni how important it was for me to be there. I think ultimately ties back into everything. I think about it, I'm like, ultimately, if God didn't want me to go to university, I wouldn't have gone. And if God didn't want me to be here, I wouldn't have been here. But I think what you just mentioned now, but just taking your time, it reminded me of the time. They literally sat me down and they're like, yeah, we love that you got there, but what we want you to do is go and sleep. They literally like, I don't know, Rara. Think about it.
Listen, we love this for you, but the reality is,
They were literally like, how can you get robbed? You're gonna hire accountants. You're gonna get robbed. I was like, yeah, that's what's up. They were like, go sleep. Think about it. If you come back feeling the same way tomorrow, it's a different story. And I came back and I was like, yeah, you guys, that's what's up. Let's go to uni. Let's pack these bags, which is super cool. But you mentioned something earlier about being in university, being in an institution, an educational institution, and in a sense, kind of being put in a box. This is the curriculum. This is what you need to do, and if you don't do it this way, you don't pass. You don't pass. You don't get accredited. You don't get qualified in a way. But that just got me thinking about the creative side of things. And you had mentioned already, Kuti, undergrad was a little bit nicer because you had that freedom to express yourself. And then you also said something along the lines of, I had hoped to have people who can understand and accommodate the crazy ideas that I have in my head. You are a creative at the end of the day, and you have things in your head that you want to express and put out to the world. But in an institution, it's not always that easy. So that got me thinking, do you think like creativity is something that can be taught, or like it's inherent? Can you be successful without going into mainstream institutional education? And at the same time, on the other hand, can you be successful um, going through that process of being in mainstream institutional education?
Okay, that's a really good question. Um, After my own experience, I believe that I wouldn't be the designer that I am today if I hadn't gone through the institution that I went through. Simply because the amount of mind blowing things that I learned at university, I cannot even begin to like list them down. There's just so much that I learned, you know. Um, there's so much, and I think a big part of that is there's so much you can learn from other experienced creative people. With industrial design, for example, there is there are intricacies that come with experience, right? But I feel like going into an institution basically fast tracks, or like learning from someone else fast tracks your process of becoming that person, or like not that person, or like it fast tracks your growth as a creative person. It fast tracks your growth as a designer, for example. Um, for example, the design process. I used to think, oh, it's like a certain way of, it's something that just comes naturally. It's very individual and unique to each person, but it's actually something that can be taught. So with the design process, for example, there are steps that if you follow those specific steps in your process of designing a specific product, or like a specific, or like a particular process or a system, you can actually end up with good results if you follow that step by step, whether you have a creative bone in you or you don't. If you just follow that process, you can actually get somewhere. So I'm not specifically saying that you have to go like to a big ass institution and like, you know, they like now I feel like we're all so blessed, and to a certain extent it can be a curse. But like to live in this time where there's just so much knowledge everywhere, you can literally have the same knowledge as someone with a university degree just by going on YouTube and learning different softwares
Just by
by watching
going to
YouTube
Chat
videos.
GPT.
I mean, ChatGPT is still a little flimsy. I'm still, quite skeptical about it. But the YouTube videos, there are so many creatives on there who can teach you how to use Photoshop, all these different softwares. Um, but I feel like for me, going to university definitely gave me like a good base. It gave me a good foundation to be able to make like reasonable creative choices, or or to be able to think in a certain way. Because even now, with all this stuff about self-awareness and emotional intelligence, it's something that I learned during a module I was taking last year. It's something that I never would have, I mean, maybe I would have learned it on my own, like at a much later stage in life. But just because there was someone there who had the experience and the knowledge and the wisdom, to be able to put it into something digestible that you can then take as like a step-by-step guide to apply to your own life, I feel like that's definitely a huge advantage. So in essence, what I'm saying is going through an institution has its advantages. Of course, there are also like major disadvantages, because you have to do certain things certain way in a certain way. And I'm not saying this is the exact same thing throughout all institutions in the world. It may be different from institution to institution, but there's definitely an advantage of getting some kind of education, or intentionally getting information, or learning something, or growing yourself more through knowledge about a certain creative industry you may want to go into. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I always love asking that question and hearing out, because I think for a long time I was of the idea that it's bad. Education, mainstream education is a trap. It's just trying to take your money. But
I mean, they are, but
but I think as they take our money, we should make the most of that opportunity. We should make the most of the situation we're in at that time. And you
true.
mentioned
Yeah.
so much in there, man. I think one of the biggest things was emotional intelligence. And again, it brings me back to that idea of mine, yokuthi Lone Ranger, ndakaipa ini, soldier, and and it's not the case. And being in university helps you realize that it's really small things, being able to being quote unquote forced to be put into groups to work on a project. At the time, you're like, group projects on a board, but it helps
I
you.
hated group projects,
But it helps
until
you.
I realized why.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanaka, for being here and just taking time out of your schedule to, sit down and share your thoughts. I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate all the lessons you've shared here. It's really been incredible. I appreciate you calling me out as well on multiple things, and I think we need that as creators, but more so as human beings. Brings me back again, always bringing me back, to that concept of community, but needing people. Without that, I'm not able to learn, and I'm not able to have lessons pointed out to me that I would have missed. So it's incredible having this podcast, looking back at people who come through and share the things that they share, because it's an incredible reference point for me. And this one is no different. It's absolutely exceptional. The things that you've been able to achieve now, and the things that you're going to achieve. I can't wait to see what God's going to do with you. I'm super excited about the podcast as well. And I wish you nothing but the best. Cheers and take care.